How do you go from plug socket to powering and controlling these on a layout to both best budget manage and future-proof any investment today and beyond? Will the model train set ever become the model railway I feel at heart, especially going into 2026? Basics first, you need power. Yes, there's battery-powered model train sets, but only in a junior train set sort of way at present, out of the box, unless you go to some really bespoke layouts. And there's one in Leicester, years ahead of its time, and there's a picture on the screen now. Our model railways today still rely on mains track power, so a mains transformer is needed to reduce the output from the usual UK household sockets, which have an alternating current, down to a modern railways direct current power supply of 15 volts. I always recommend looking for a regulated 4 amp output, as any lower will limit the number of trains or accessories you can power. So i.e. up to 2 trains at any one time. If you plan more than a basic train set, avoid the 1 amp output version seen on the right here. Usually found also in box sets. And so invest the extra £25-30, it'll save you buying it again later, if a model railway is what you want in future, not just a model train set to run around the Christmas tree. I always recommend never really ever using cheap power supplies unless you really know the information and they come highly recommended from someone that you know very well in the hobby. Next, how do we connect this power to the track? Usually this unit connects to a controller unit, or what we sometimes call in model railway terms a command station, unless using this Hornby lead in conjunction with a beginner's solder-free type Hornby power track piece, for instance. But this is only when using, say, the Hornby track system, the Hornby HM7000 fitted locos, and the free DCC app. And don't worry if this all sounds like gobbledygook, and don't panic or go buy that all-in-one box set just yet, because after today you'll certainly be far better equipped to make a more informed choice for yourself that could save you more expensive upgrade decisions down the line in whatever scale you feel suits the intended end user or users, and whatever space you or they plan to put this model railway layout in. So what do all these terms mean, and which one do I need? Originally, it was a case of you would have a DC controller that would come in 1, maybe 2 knobs, and it would be a transformer. You have an oval of track, and the wires come out of the back to one side, and of course to the other side, like so. Now, most model train sets will of course include a power track like this one here from Hornby, where the wires that feed the track just clip in, but a model railway enthusiast will solder their wires to the track. And more on this and more courses about this in future. But today we're looking at control. And the more that you turn this controller up, the more current is pushed down these 2 wires. And whatever is on that track, be it 1 locomotive or 2, they get fed that information. So those 2 trains would run with the same current. They would run slightly different. One would run faster and slower than the other, because just depending on how the mechanics are in the train, but they will both get the same signal. The only way you could run the second controller and have a second train is to have a second loop of track. Or there was another way, by creating, say, a siding, and I will look at points, which are turnouts in another course. But yes, basically using set track points, which are usually more akin to a model train set than a model railway, but could also be converted from DC to DCC using what we call track clips by Hornby that are like little springy staples. But that being said, without the track clips in, make or create a siding, and when those points are then thrown across, the train can go into that siding, and when the train is left on the siding and the points are thrown back, then that train on that track is isolated from that loop, and you can run sort of 2 trains on 1 loop, as it were. Not together, but you can keep them on the track. And yes, in future we'll have a course on points, streamline points, set track points, electrofrog, unifrog, and Insel Frog, all on one episode so you can see the differences. Keeping it simple here today. Famous quote, keep it simple, stupid. Back to DC basics. The only way you could run the second controller and have a second train is to have a second loop of track. And this one again feeds both rails and pushes the current up with a control, like a dimmer switch on a light bulb, and you would have a train on there. And that one would go backwards and forwards depending on where you used the selector switch, which is usually something like that. Toggle one way, forward, toggle the other way, reverse, turn your switch up and down, and your train goes backwards and forwards. So they would operate independently. Then we went on to DCC, usually either in one or two controllers with a little screen sometimes on, like an Elite. And that pushes current out to a loop of track. And that again goes to one side and the other side. Now this is DC, which means direct current. And DCC isn't anything to do with direct current. It's digital command control. And that's where a lot of mix-ups come in, I think. People think it's digital direct current or something like that, but it isn't. It's totally different meanings. So on here, you would have the same sort of setup, and you'd probably have various buttons and things like that you can operate functions with. But basically what it does is send packets of information to this track. So if you've got one train here and you've allocated train 1 and say this is train 4 on your layout, doesn't have to be, it could be train 2. But when the address on the controller matches the address in the locomotive in DCC, then those packets of information that come from the controller down the track go just to that nominated decoder. And say we had another 2 on the layout, and that's number 2, and that's number 3. That's number 4, and that's number 1. Usually any locomotive decoder comes shipped to address number 3. Now you can go on your programming track, you put your locomotive on it, you connect that programming track to your control unit, and then following the instructions, you readdress that decoder to any number you want within reason, up to about 257, 258. But that's up to you, and some channels are left for accessories. We'll go into this later. But once this is programmed in, you then put it back on your layout and you go from there. So now you've programmed or addressed the decoders in the locomotives. You then select the number of the train you want to drive on your controller, and from that point onwards, you can drive that train until another address number is picked. That's why we have twin controllers, because then we can control 2 trains at once, and it makes it a lot more interesting. Then we go on to app control, and that breaks out even more. But anyway, that's a little bit later. From 1 to 4, that train will then take packets of information from this controller. And so it will control the trains independently of each other on the same loop of track. Where in DC, both trains would move if you turn that up and down. They can't be controlled independently unless you have a separate isolated loop. So everybody, of course, started going over to DCC. But some people, old school, maybe a little bit fearful of tech or whatever it is, would stay on DC because of perceived complications that this system would put up, if you know what I mean, for want of better words. And then you can also program these locomotives to do other things, like play sounds. So the Elite, you would have function buttons on, and you could play a whistle and stuff like that, as you all know, because decoders are also programmed with functions and sounds before you fit them in, unless they're already pre-fitted. So when I hopped back on board, the first controller I bought was a Hornby Elite, connected to my track, and then I'd connected through walkabout cables to select controllers, which were also all DCC. Then we could get rid of those Because Railmaster came along, remember, on the computer, on the Windows computer. Now, Railmaster could connect to an Elite controller. It couldn't connect to a Select controller from Hornby, which was the cheaper version with just one throttle, because it didn't have a USB port. Now, to try and make Railmaster a little bit more cost effective, an E-Link unit was introduced. Now, this had a USB port on. It had no other form of control on it whatsoever, but it was the interface between the computer and the layout. And this connected to the track or the programming track. And the E-Link unit, once plugged into a power adapter, then could transfer that information across. These units are still available, and I would avoid them like the plague. Also, the Elite could be updated via a Windows computer on that USB port, or with Hornby Selects, they had to be sent away to be updated. And some are not as updated as others, but if you've got a really old one and you did want it updating, I think you can send it to Hornby for 15 quid, or at least you could do. So once the Elite was connected to a Windows computer via USB, then you could start using Railmaster or pay for a paid upgrade and get Railmaster Pro, which offered, through Windows technology and voice recognition, which was sort of amateurish at the time, you could get voice control, so the big hopes for it. Also, it could take advantage of a touch screen, but of course Windows computers didn't really have touch screens unless you went for a really updated model. If you configured it all right, you could then get your gadgets like your iPhone or an iPad to connect. But it was all very spasmodic, and you didn't just go on the App Store and download the app. It all was quite a long-winded process, and it relied not on Bluetooth as they do now, it relied on your home router. So I'm in the house, I'm up here, the router's down here, and the signal was quite weak. So then you would have to try and set up a network and go to another wireless router a bit nearer the loft. And it all got so complicated, I actually bought a different system. And that was Digitrax. Now, there was the Z21 system that I could have gone for at the same time. Hold it, I hear you say, what about HMDC? Not HMDCC, we're on about the HM6000 app-based analog control system from Hornby. And that came in a box with a plug-in transformer, and then 2 wires off that went to your track as before, but that is DC with a Bluetooth antenna built into it. And that then connects to your app, the HMDC app. This being a Bluetooth signal, but this is analog control with a built-in Bluetooth antenna. And then to go with this unit, you then buy another box, the R7293 HM6010 app-based accessory control. That too is a Bluetooth unit. That too plugs in, and this has 4 outputs that you can use to points, signals, lights, or any other accessories if they're impulse based and things like that, but that's another story. We're just sticking to the basics here. And this too has a built-in antenna which connects wirelessly to your HMDC app, not HMDCC. So that is analog app-based DC control. That's just something that came on the market in between all the other things to confuse you. And that's great for some analog cheaper train sets that Hornby supplied. They didn't have to then put a controller in there. They just put one of these units in. And you're starting to get that app control, starting to introduce it to people. But as you progress, you'll probably want to let go of all that and go to something a little bit more involved. Unless you use the HMDCC app system, and you can use the accessory control, not this unit, but you can use the R7293. People have done a workaround with that, and it works. But I'm going Digitrax. Now, there was the Z21 system that I could have gone for at the same time. Why did I go for the Digitrax over the Z21? Now, Z21 could also connect to your iPad, and it had its own app. But again, it connects through a router which connected to the Z21. And you had to get the right one. There's a black version and a white version. I also wanted a handheld throttle. And since I've bought the Digitrax system, the Z21 now can come with a handheld throttle as well. Remember when we talked about power supplies? Well, the Z21, this one I've just shown, has a 3 amp output power supply. The Elite controller has a 4 amp power supply output. The Select, Hornby Select, has that 1 amp power output, a bit like the E-Link system. And the Digitrax system that I have has a 5 amp output. The Digitrax system just seems a little bit better built somehow. And the handheld throttle is a twin throttle as well. You've got 2 controls. And with so many brands bringing their own sort of control systems out, we have really got to ask ourselves, is it going to be right in future? Is it future-proofing the investment that you make? And retailers are bringing their own control systems out and saying they're the best thing since sliced bread. So obviously they're not going to push Digitrax if they've got their own controller system on the market already, are they? And I found Digitrax to tick all the boxes at the same time, including Mac, not Windows, connection for block detecting locomotives in future, should I so wish. So go look at that as well. Now, the throttle would either connect wired to the Digitrax controller or wirelessly if you plugged in a unit that came with my Digitrax DCS 210 Plus Evolution system. I looked at both these and I thought, I still want a handheld controller, a dual one, and this was a dual one. And it also connected wirelessly, where if you remember, the Elite or the Select was always connected with a wire. So this is a command station that connects to your layout. It will control all your accessory decoders. And I thought, move on. So now I've got Digitrax. Then came HMDCC, free app-based system, Bluetooth connectivity on your iPad or gadget. And this would then, if you brought out of retirement your old Elite or Select and plugged into the ExpressNet socket, a dongle, you could then connect wirelessly to the app and control DCC trains, and you can connect to HM7000 trains by using the dongle. Of course, this would connect wirelessly to these, and this wirelessly to these trains. And so the Elite and the Selects have come back out of retirement, and you've got your free app, and you've got your throttle, which is, of course, wired into your plug socket, and this one is wired into a plug socket. But you can't move that around because it's wired in. But this one, as we said, had its own throttle, and it would also plug into that unit, which then does it wirelessly as well. So, what's the disadvantage and advantage of each? This one is ExpressNet, and this system is LocoNet, and you can't connect either to each. So, within the app, I can then toggle into DCC mode these HM7000 Bluetooth trains and control them on the Digitrax system. Also, via USB, I can connect to a Mac computer and use software. Now, that will then open the book up for block detection. And block detection is where I want to go. So all these block detection units can all toggle together, run my layout, and connect into the Digitrax system. What's missing? They say in the future accessories and signals will be able to be controlled with the app. As yet, there's a workaround, but we won't go into that. That's going down the HMDC route. But in future, accessories and points and signals will be able to be thrown and things like that. At the moment, you can also do that through these units by a company called Yamork, which used to be Digikaiges. Now, I like Yamork because they're a bit cheaper than Digitrax block detection units and things like that. So I've gone and used those, and I bought them before this ever came out. So this has taken a bit of a sidestep because I've gone on to this because I've made Scheidel. And then I started running my 00 trains through it, and then my old DCC locomotives up in Lofthouse. But I could not have block detection on this unless Hornby develop it. Now, in the past, Hornby were going to develop block detection of their own with an ExpressNet system. They let it go. It's possible in future they'll bring out their own block detection units and things and signals they've hinted at. But as yet, you can't do it. But I've already got these. But what's the downside of this then? If I can do everything on this, I can control my accessories, signals, everything with this. What's the letdown? Up until now, there was no app. So I couldn't use my iPhone and iPad until I found WeThrottle. Now, WeThrottle connects again with another unit that looks like this, which is the Digitrax LNW1. And this unit, once plugged in and connected via LocoNet to your Digitrax command station, will allow wireless connection to an iPad of up to 4 gadgets. To get 4 gadgets connected to an Elite and run it like that, you need 4 dongles. Now, 4 dongles, they work out, I think, about 40 quid each. This unit's about 70 quid. So if you're going to connect 4 gadgets, it's also just one unit and one LocoNet cable. If you're using a Select, it's only got one output, so you need the club adapters to connect a lot of dongles together. You can connect up to 2 on the Elite. I'm happy with that, and I'm not going to let it go. But I've swayed back over here because of the WeThrottle. Now, what software am I going to use on the Mac? Because this opens up not only block detection, but automation. And I'm going with iTrain because it works on a Mac. Train Controller only works on Windows computers, as did Railmaster with the Elite. So I've gone down iTrain. Now, WeThrottle is more basic than the HMDCC app, but you can add things like thumbnail pictures and titles and stuff like that into your roster through JMRI, which is software, and it loads on Windows and Macs. And the thing I like about the WeThrottle, you can have up to 4 trains on one screen. And I like that. I know which train is which just by the numbers. And as I say, if I get toggled up to JMRI and I put it on the Mac, I can then download some pictures to this and I can add them to a roster. So that was the thing that was missing. I like app control. And yes, the HMDCC app is free, but I found glitches with it since the Consisting update. And so Consisting works better on DCC. And to be perfectly honest, any HM7000 decoder I found works better when it's running through Digitrax in DCC mode. This doesn't use Bluetooth. It uses its own little wireless router built into this LNW1. And I've found that just as good connectivity-wise. Since that update, as we said, in fact, it's now a lot better. It's as intuitive. There's not as much going on in this and that, but the layout on an iPad, which I'm using, or up to 4 gadgets of my choice, I'm finding 4 on a screen is great. Plus, I can also put another 2 trains, should I so wish, onto my DT602 throttle. And I can update this and this via a Windows computer. So I've plugged in my old Sony XP, which was never no good or much good for Railmaster, but for updating things like this, it's worked just fine. I've connected it to the XP computer through the command station with a LocoNet cable. I've got my throttle, I've got my command station, I've got Mac control, I've got block detection. I can connect both these Once I've used the HMDCC app, whatever HM7000 Bluetooth decoders are in any trains, they go into DCC mode, and then I can run them on this system. This is why I've gone with Digitrax. I've shown you my journey so you can make a better informed decision whether you're upgrading, beginning, thinking of changing a control system, or looking at something new for the future. Wherever you're at, you can now get that information into your head, let it go round a bit, and make the right choice for your layout. And that's just about it for today. So give us a thumbs up and subscribe. It won't hurt the bank balance, helping you to help me to help everybody else. Until the next one, happy modelling.